So this is our last input of the day, and I'm very pleased to say we've got an input from Olivier Schutter, who was the former Special Rapporteur on the right to food and has been a good friend to Nourish and to Scotland for the last few years. He's been a real helpful guiding force. He couldn't be here today. He does lots of various busy things, but he sent us a video message. Now, Olivier is the original talking head, okay? That's all you get. You get no graphics, you get no shots of animals, you get nothing interesting except Olivier talking, right? So, enjoy.
Let me start by noting that the food systems we inherit from date from the 1960s and 1970s, from a time when the key preoccupation of policymakers, and indeed of the population as a whole, was to increase food production by industrial means, by producing on a large scale in order to reduce the workforce in agriculture, to replace women and men with machinery, and to produce large volumes of stuff that could be used by the food processing industry in order to deliver foods for the large retailers. That was really the philosophy that was underlying the reforms of the late 1950s and 1960s, at the time when the Common Agricultural Policy was established in Europe, when the key preoccupation was really to achieve mass production, economies of scale, mechanization of production in order to provide large volumes of raw materials to the agricultural markets. Now, that system, those choices we've made in the 1960s have increasingly been questioned in recent years. They have very severe environmental impacts, destroying the health of the soil, destroying biodiversity, and leading to the impressive growth of greenhouse gas emissions resulting from agriculture, but more importantly, even from the packaging, processing, transport of food and preparation of inputs for industrial food production. They've also led to the disappearance of many small-scale farms, many relatively small production units that are less competitive in an environment in which economies of scale are a key competitive advantage for the large players. And thirdly, this industrialization of food production has led to very problematic health impacts, with a significant growth of overweight and obesity rates in the population. In Europe today, some 20% of the population is obese, and that is largely the result of the fact that we've increasingly been consuming processed, ultra-processed foods instead of preparing fresh foods that are local and that are minimally processed in homes as we have done in the past. So today we are looking for possibilities of reform. We are trying to relocalize, to re-territorialize food systems, and to shift diets so that they become more sustainable and are more based on local and seasonal produce. How to do this? The problem is that the system we have inherited from is very resistant to change, and that all the elements that compose this system have co-evolved over the years. In other terms, they have become mutually reinforcing. They are supporting one another. They fit together, if you wish, so that it is very difficult to displace any one of them without changing the system as a whole. What I mean by the elements of the food system are four things. First of all, a certain technological pathway, investments in logistical chains, in storage facilities, in processing facilities, in mechanization that have encouraged large-scale production of raw materials for the food processing industry to be provided with cheap inputs. Secondly, we have the emergence of large economic actors at different segments of the food chains, large commodity buyers, large food processing companies, large retailers that dominate the system to such an extent that it makes it very difficult for competitors to emerge and to provide real alternatives for consumers, particularly for low-income families. Thirdly, we have cultural shifts that have taken place. Increasingly, people do not cook fresh produce at home. They depend on processed or ultra-processed foods, microwavable options, if you wish, or they opt for convenience foods that are very easily prepared or snacks. And as a result, it is very difficult to reconstitute this food culture that was perhaps still dominant in the 1950s and 1960s. Fourth and finally, we have a political system that is to a significant extent captured by the large economic interests, because the large companies that dominate the food system can promise that as champions of this low-cost food economy, they will be able to produce en masse for mass consumption to be possible at an affordable cost for families. And so we have these technical, economic, cultural, and political elements of the system that have become mutually reinforcing, mutually supportive, and are therefore resulting in a very strong inertia of the inherited system. So how to change this? Well, one experiment that we have launched in Europe, in the EU, is the experiment of bringing together many groups that, although they are not used to working together, have a joint interest in reforming food systems. And I would like to refer here in particular to the project that was led by IPES Food, the International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food Systems, of building a common food policy for the EU by bringing together social movements, NGOs from various sectors, development NGOs, environmental NGOs, groups working with small-scale farmers, groups working with public health advocates, in order to build together a series of proposals to reform the food system in the EU. And what is really striking is that as a result of 3 years of work together, we produced some 80 recommendations that today the European Commission is considering for its next food strategy from farm to fork that was announced as part of the Green Deal that shall be launched in the next few weeks. And so I very much hope that Scotland can be inspired in doing the same at its level, bringing together groups that can form strong alliances, forcing policymakers to address the recommendations that result from these alliances, and ultimately working to reform the food systems for greater sustainability. I wish you all the best in your endeavor, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.